of Dubé Part 3. There's the book. I preview. If you haven't seen the last two videos or not aware, I wrote a book about my family history called The Book of Dubé. So this series, it's probably going to be a 4, maybe a 5-part series. This is Part 3, The Family Pedigree and the Norman Conquest. As I hope you watched in Part 1, in the beginning, and Part 2, The Birth of a Name, you discovered a few secrets and some new connections. Now let's discover some great history I found while I was researching for the book. It all starts by looking at the family pedigree. There are literally thousands of people in my family tree, so I can only highlight the ones that I feel the most relevant to the story of the Dubé family history. Whether you are a Dubé or a Dubuc, and or your family married a Morin, a Lozo, or a Couture, we all hail from some pretty exclusive historical figures. There are many family names in our history. I focus on those 4 because they're the closest to the latest, I guess the last couple of, they're the closest to the last several generations. And then I go back from there. So, like I said, there's thousands of people in the family tree, but I look at my grandfather or my great-grandfather and I look at who they married, whether it was a Morin, a Lozin, or a Couture, and I followed that lineage back as far as I could go. I'm going to start this epic story by showcasing the direct family lineage from the Dubuc side, starting with the first landed immigrants to the New World, Canada, and the Norman Conquest. The lineage I referenced to my place in the family tree. So if you are our first cousin, then all of this is in reference to your position in the family hierarchy. For those of you who are watching who are family members, and I'm sure there are other people who are just interested in the story and have picked up on the video and the documentary series. But for those, I'm going to be referencing as from where my position was in the family tree. So if you're watching, just hear a great set of stories and enjoy. So let's begin with the first official landed immigrants to Canada. I traced the Dubé lineage going back 10 generations to my 10th great-grandfather, who was Jean-François Dubuc, born in 1590 in La Rochelle-Ony, France, also known as Charente-Maritime, France. My French pronunciation may not be the best, so you'll have to bear with me. He died in 1613 in his hometown. I couldn't find a wife, but I did find one child. His name was Pierre Dubuc, born in 1612 in Rouen, Saint-Martin, Haute-Normandy, France. And he married Marie-Françoise Hotto, born in 1620 in Saint Trinity de Bois, Guillaume, Seine-Maritime, France. They were my 9th great-grandparents on the Dubé side. Marie died in 1667, followed by Pierre in 1685 in Rouen, Normandy, France. They had 2 children together, Jean-Baptiste, born 1638, and Michel, born 1642. Jean-Baptiste Dubuc married François-Marie Lachevêque, becoming my 8th great-grandparents and the first landed immigrants to the New World and part of the Norman Conquest of Canada. So, you're looking back at our family history, the very first family members that immigrated from France were Jean-Baptiste Dubuc and François-Marie Lachevêque, our 8th great-grandparents, or my 8th great-grandparents. When Jean-Baptiste Dubuc was born on January 21st, 1638 in Rouen, France, his father Pierre was 26 and his mother Marie was 17. He was baptized in 1641 at the Église Sainte-Trinité de Bois-Guillaume, Haute-Normandy, France. It's a mouthful. Jean-Baptiste landed in Quebec, Canada in 1668, as noted in the U.S. and Canada Passenger and Immigration List Index. He met François Marie Lachevêque after immigrating to Quebec, then married her. He died on November 1st, 1688 in Pointe-Saint, Quebec at the age of 50 and was buried in Pointe-aux-Tremblay, Quebec. When François-Marie Lachevêque was born in 1641 in Rouen-Saint-Martin, France, her father Adrien was 26 and her mother Françoise was 26 as well. She married Jean-Baptiste Dubuc on January 14th, 1668 in Quebec. They had 5 children during their marriage, and she died on July 4th, 1711 in Nouvelle, Quebec at the age of 70 and was buried in Quebec. I believe Nouvelle, that's what they called Quebec City at the time. They had 3 boys and 2 girls together. The first was Jean-François de Buc, who was born in 1668 and died in 1732, and he lived to the age of 64. Then there was Marie-Françoise de Buc, born 1669 and died in 1670, but she only lived about a year or less. Back in those days, they didn't really have health care, obviously, so a lot of things happened, whether it was crib death or they got pneumonia or they got whatever they got. There were lots of times, and through some of these stories that I'm going to tell you about the ancestry, there are many who died young. So the third, born to our land of immigrants, was Romain de Buc, born 1671, died 1711, lived 40 years, and he was our seventh great-grandfather. The fourth came from that family, Joseph de Buc, born 1674, died 1693, and lived 19 years. And the last of that family was Marie-Angelique de Buc, who was born in 1678 and died in 1691, and she lived 13 years. Now let's get back. Our seventh great-grandparents were Romain de Buc and Marie-Anne Matt. They're the first generation born in Canada. Romain de Buc was born on March 24, 1671 in Quebec City. His father, Jean-Baptiste, was 33 at the time, and his mother, Françoise, was 30. He married Anne Pinel, and they had 8 children together. He then later married Marie-Anne Matte, and they had 3 children together. He died on October 20th, 1711, in Nouvelle, Quebec, at the age of 40, and was buried in Pointe-aux-Tremblay, Quebec. Now, Marie-Anne Matte was born on May 18th, 1687 in Nouvelle, Quebec. Her father, Nicholas, was 50, and her mother, Marie, was 37. After she married Romain de Buc, having 3 children together, she then married Etienne Magna on February 27, 1713 in Pointe-aux-Tremblay, Quebec. She died in 1731 in her hometown at the age of 44. So they had 3 kids together. Their first one was Joseph de Buc, born 1702 and died in 1780, and he became my sixth great-grandfather. Second born was François de Buc, born 1710 and died 1714, so he had a short life, 4 years. And the third was André de Buc, born 1711 and died 1759. So our 6 great-grandparents were Joseph de Buc and Marie-Angelique Pedigree. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that properly or not, but Joseph de Buc was born on July 4th, 1702 in Nouvelle, Quebec. His father, Romain, was 31, and his mother, Marie, now get this, was only 15. He remarried the second time, and he married very young. She was only 15. He married Marie-Angelique Pedigree March 18th, 1734 in his hometown. When Marie-Angelique Pedigree was born on April 20th, 1713, in Nouvelle, Quebec. Her father, Jean, was 52, and her mother, Marie, was 38. She married Joseph de Buc on March 18th, 1734, in her hometown. They had 10 children over 17 years. She died May 3rd, 1758, in her hometown at the age of 45, and was buried in Nouvelle, Quebec. They had 10 children together, 5 boys and 5 girls. So I'll run through the list here. The firstborn was Louis-Joseph de Buc, born 1734, died 1803. Second was Romain de Buc, 1736, died 1792. And the third born was Jean-Baptiste de Buc, born 1738 and died in 1814, and he became our 5th great-grandfather. And the fourth born was Marie-Angelique de Buc, born 1739 to 1825. Fifth was Marie-Madeleine de Buc, born 1741 and died 1815. Sixth was Augustine de Buc, born 1743, died 1833. The seventh was Marie-Anne de Buc, born 1745, died 1764. And the eighth was Marie-Therese de Buc, born 1746 and died 1782. Antoine de Buc, the ninth, was born 1750 and died 1774. Followed by the 10th, Charlotte de Buc, who was born 1751 and died in 1833. Now getting back, Jean-Baptiste de Buc married Marie-Therese Bordelot, and they were my fifth great-grandparents. Jean-Baptiste Dubuc was born March 28, 1738. Very close to my birthday, actually. I was born March 28th. He was born March 29th. In Nouvelle, Quebec, his father Joseph was 35 and his mother Marie was 24. He married Marie-Therese Bordelot in 1768 in his hometown, and he died October 26, 1814 in his hometown, having lived a long life for back then, 76 years. When Marie-Therese Bordelot was born on June 13, 1746, in Nouvelle, Quebec, her father Louis was 35 and her mother Geneviève was 29. She married Jean-Baptiste in 1768 in her hometown. They had 8 children over 16 years. She died in 1823 in her hometown, having lived a long life of 77 years. So they both had a long life together. So let's go through their children. Jean-Baptiste Dubuc was born 1772, but I couldn't find, there was no date of birth that I could find. Joseph Dubuc, born 17, and he was obviously named after his father. So he would have been like Jean-Baptiste Dubuc in that family, the second, but there are many that you'll notice a lot of names were repeated throughout the family over the years. The third was Augustine Dubuc, born 1778, died 1846, followed by Marie-Madeleine Dubuc, born 1782, and there's no record of her death. Nicholas Dubuc, born 1784, died 1786, died very young, 2 years old. Anisette Dubuc, born 1786, again, no record of a death. And the seventh born was our fourth great-grandfather, Julien Dubuc, born 1788 and died 1859. And the eighth born in that family, Therese Dubuc, born 1789, died in 1823. Now, our fourth great-grandparents, in which was Julien Dubuc, married Marie-Angelique Hamel. So Julien was born March 7th, 1788 in Nouvelle, Quebec. And his father, Jean-Baptiste, was 49, and his mother, Marie-Therese, was 41. He married Marie-Angelique Hamel on August 27th, 1809 in Quebec City, which again, I think that's what Nouvelle was what it was called. I think that's what they called it back then. They had one child during their marriage. He died on March 28th, 1859. Now that's very weird because I was born March 28th, 1959. Exactly 100 years earlier than when I was born, he passed. At the age of 71 and was buried in Quebec City, Quebec. When Marie-Angelique Hamel was born on January 4th, 1793 in Dacian-Lorette, Quebec, her father Louis was 33 and her mother Françoise Angelique was 27. She married Julien Dubuc. They had one child during their marriage. She died on August 17th, 1868, having also lived a long life of 75 years. So their only child was Louis Dubuc, who was our third great-grandfather. And we're now getting into the roots where some of you are going to recognize some of these names. Our third great-grandparents, Louis Dubuc and Marie Locadier Ducheneau. Now, he's got quite I believe this is the right one. Yes, he's got quite a history. Louis Dubuc was born on October 7th, 1836 in Quebec. His father, Julien, was 48 and his mother, Marie, was 43. He married Marie Locadier Ducheneau. He died January 5th, 1914 in Ottawa, Ontario, having lived a long life of 77 years. Now, if you remember back to part 2, when I talked about the birth of a name, the Book of Dubé, the birth of a name, it starts with this generation. And that's in, you saw, if you go back, if you haven't seen that video, go back and I talk about the birth of a name. This is where it started. So Marie Ducheneau was born May 30th, 1877 in Chambly, Quebec. Her father, Francois, was 28 and her mother, Marguerite, was 37. She married Louis Dubuc on November 11th, 1857 in Lisette-sur-Mer, Quebec. They had 4 children in 23 years. She died on August 12th in 1910 in Hamner, Ontario, at the age of 73 and was buried in Ottawa, Ontario. The firstborn was Louis Etienne Dubuc. And that's the huge family that you'll see in the past video where there was like something like 30 children. But I only found, again, we'll get into it. Louis Etienne de Buck was born 1861, died 1931, became our second great-grandfather. The second born from Louis and Marie was William de Buck, born 1862, died in 1900. The third was Arthur Prospel de Buck, born 1864, died 1911. The fourth is Evelina, and I had a reference here that she went by Emma de Buck, born in 1885, and there's no record of her death. So our second great-grandparents, Louis Etienne de Buck and Virginie Valaquette. You first learned about Louis and Virginie in part 2, birth and name. I talked about that a little earlier. Louis Etienne de Buck was born on March 18th, 1861 in Portneuf, Quebec. His father Louis was 24 and his mother Marie was 23. He first married Virginie Valaquette, and they had 16 children together that we know of. That's, well, we'll see. We'll explain more. He then married Yvonne Potin-Aymar, and they had 7 children together. It is thought that he had another 7 children with Virginie, however. No records of these children can be found. He died on July 2nd, 1931 in Ottawa, Ontario, at the age of 70 and was buried there. When Virginie Valaquette was born in April 1862 in Ottawa, her father, Sevier, was 18 and her mother, Louise, was 18. She married Louis Etienne de Buck on November 13th, 1882 in her hometown of Ottawa. She died on June 5th, 1913 in Ontario at the age of 51 and was buried also in Ottawa. So here are the 16 of the possible 23 children that they had, or that Louis had with his first wife. In the book, I only noted 14 children. However, there were a few more names that I had found with unfortunately very little reference that I include here, as it was found after I printed the book that there had been more children. So the firstborn was Marie Virginie Rosanna de Buck, born 1883 and died in 1925. The second was Wilfred Joseph de Buck, born 1884, died 1885. The third was Emile de Buck, born 1885, died, and there's no record of what happened to him. The third was Exilda de Buck, born 1886, died 1887, short life, less than a year. Emile de Buck, which is our first great-grandfather, born 1861, died 1931. Yes, he became our first great-grandfather, and I'm sure there are a few people alive who remember him. William de Buck, born 1862, died 1900. Arthur Prospel de Buck, born 1864, died in 1911. Beatrice de Buck, born 1890, died in 1921. Followed by Arthur de Buck, born 1892, no known date of what happened to him. Joseph Etienne de Buck was born in 1893 and died in 1893, another short life. Joseph Etienne Eugene de Buck, so the next one born, 1898, died in 1963. And then there was Alice de Buck, born 1899, died in 1899, again short life. Joseph Louis Hercule de Buck was born in 1902, but his death was unknown. Beatrice Cecile de Buck was born in 1904 and died in 1964. Number 15, Marie Jean Mathilde de Buck, born 1905, died 1979. And then they're followed by the last one on record, and we know there's some missing. And we know this because there was an article in the newspaper that I talked about, I think in one of the last videos, where we found that it was referenced that there were 30 children. So, like I said, there's a few missing. Armand Andre de Buck, who actually was not raised in the de Buck family, he was raised in the Duby family, and we believe that's why his name was he changed his name. He was born in 1907 and died in 1967. So we weren't sure why he changed his name, but then I was later told that he wasn't raised in the de Buck family. So I guess when you look at the size of the family, and his mother had passed on, I think she may have died in childbirth with him, actually, I'm not sure. Louis Etche's second wife, Yvonne Potin-Amard, was born on August 9th, 1893 in Embrun, Ontario. She married Louis Etche de Buck on August 1st, 1914. They had 7 children over 15 years. She died on January 3rd, 1980 in Brockville, Ontario at the age of 86. So here are their 7. They had Charles Jean-Marc Joseph de Buck, born 1915, died 1921. Then there's Louis Masté de Buck, born 1916 to 1999. Then there's Joseph Jean-Paul Orléans de Buck, born 1920 and died 1921. Then there was Jacqueline Laurette Alice de Buck, born 1921, died 2012, not that long ago. And then 5th was Robert Charles Honoré de Buck, born 1924, and we have no record of when he died. Followed by Gaston Felix de Buck, born 1927 and died 1975. And number 7 was Maurice Marcel de Buck, born 1930 and died in 1931. Now, just in reference to this family, I've actually been in contact with, like, some of this information I actually got from Louis Masté de Buck's, I think it's his grandson. Anyway, I have to go back. But some of this information actually came via that family, actually. Our first great-grandparents were Emile Dubé and Emilia Alonso. Now, they come from the first marriage, like the first whack of 16 kids. Emile, I think, was the first or second born. That's our first great-grandparents, Emile Dubé, and he married Emilia Alonso. So we'll just... Emile de Buck was born in 1887 in Ottawa, Ontario. His father, Louis, was 26, and his mother, Virginie, was 25. As you learn in part 2, Birth of a Name, Emile changed his name to Dubé, giving birth to the Dubé clan, and a new name that I was born with. That's, and a lot of our cousins, everybody was a Dubé. This is where it started, and I talked about that in the Birth of a Name, part 2. He married Emilia Alonso on September 19th, 1910 in his hometown, and died January 3rd, 1953 in Ottawa, Ontario at the age of 66. When Emilia Alonso was born on March 14th, 1892 in Prescott, Ontario, her father Joseph was 32 and her mother Isilda was 33. She married Emile Dubé, having 8 children in 19 years. She died in 1963 in Ottawa, Ontario at the age of 71 and was buried there. And I affectionately call their children the Gang of 8. And if those of you who have been following the story and have the book or watched the video, you've learned about this as the first generation of Dubés born with the name. So the firstborn of the Gang of 8 was Roland Dubé, born 1911. His death is unknown, and the family is unknown. We know they exist out there, his family, but have no information on them. Secondborn was Wilfred Dubé, born 1913, died 1972. He was never married. He was single, and he passed away in 1972. Thirdborn was Joseph George Roger Dubé, born 1913, died 1993. He is my grandfather, and birth of the Dubé dozen, the second generation. And this is where I learned that my first name from the Dubé side, Joseph came. I was basically part of his namesake. Fourth was Geraldine Dubé, born 1917, died 2003, followed by Armand Joseph Hilaire Dubé, born 1920 to died 1988. The sixth was Marie Berthe Dubé, born 1922, died in 2007. The seventh was Jean-Paul Dubé, born 1928 and died 1992. Number 8 was Marie-Therese Dubé, born 1930 and died in 2000. That is the Dubé de Buck ancestry and the story of the family immigration to Canada, and they are part of the Norman conquest of Canada. That's where our roots came from, France. Now let's talk about who some of our grandparents married and the family lineage that leads to some fantastic true stories that I found. My great-grandfather, Emile Dubé, married Emilia Alonso. So I'm going to talk about the Alonso ancestry, the genealogy from the Lauzon side of the family. And there's a couple of unique figures that come out of that history. And one is the governor of New France and the Le Grand Recrue of 1653. I trace this lineage back to 1485 and the birth of our 15th great-grandfather on the Lauzon side. And it starts with Philippe de Lauzon, who was born in 1485, died in 1522, and he was our 15th great-grandfather. Now, I'm not going to get into a lot of depth about who they married and their kids, because I want to focus on the stories of some very significant figures, like I referenced, the governor of New France and Le Grand Recrue of 1653. The second born was Jacques Lauzon, born 1505, died in 1549, being our 14th great-grandfather. The third was François de Lauzon, 1527 to 1594, being the 13th great-grandfather, followed by François Lauzon, born 1558 to 1616, who was our 12th great-grandfather. Now, this is where it starts to get interesting. The number 5, the 11th great-grandfather and the first landed immigrant of the Lauzon family to Canada was Jean de Lauzon, and he actually was appointed the 4th governor and the new governor of New France, being Canada. And I'm going to get to his story in a second. I'm going to just continue on. Jean de Lauzon was born on January 2nd, 1583 in Paris, France, and his father Francois was 25, and his mother Lady Isabelle Lautin was 19. He had 3 sons with Marie Godard. He died on June 16, 1666 in his hometown, having lived a long life of 83 years. See, he immigrated to Canada and he brought a few of his sons, but then he went back after he was done being the governor. Marie Godard was born in 1583 in Paris, France. She had 3 sons with Jean de Lauzon between 1600 and 1630, and she died on January 23rd, 1651 in her hometown at the age of 68. She died before he came to Canada, which is why she didn't come. And I guess he knew that he was coming without her, and he had left his home there for her and a few of the other kids that stayed in France. But these are the children that they had together. The first was Pierre Lauzon, born 1600 and died 1687, and he was our 10th great-grandfather, the second landed immigrant of the Lauzon family. Followed by Jean Lauzon, born 1628 and died 1661. And third, Louis Lauzon, born 1630 and died 1659. Now here is, I'm going to actually read the story of the governor of New France, because this is one of the great stories that I found, courtesy of, there were several stories I found, but it started with me learning about some stories from Uncle Roy. This is what I found when I started digging. Jean de Lauzon was born in 1583 in France, Paris, France. He became the 4th governor of New France from 1651 to 1657. One of the most challenging times of the new economy. As a prominent lawyer in France in 1613, Lauzon was appointed a councillor in France's parliament. He served in several government positions, including president of the Grand Council, intendant of Provence, then of Guyenne and of Dauphiné. Those are, I guess, areas that he was in charge of. Lauzon had been developing interest in the colony of New France. He was a founding member and became the director of the Compagnie de Saint-Associé. Not sure if I pronounced that right, or if I can even translate it. Lauzon used his influence within the company to obtain land for himself and his sons in the new colony. By 1640, the Lauzons had become the biggest or the largest landowners in the colony. Their properties included the entire island of Montreal and Ile d'Orléans. So they were huge landowners in what I think was called Ville Marie back in those days. But yeah, they were huge landowners in the city of Montreal. Lauzon was appointed as governor in 1651. He moved with his 3 sons, including Francois, the eldest, who was a member of parliament for Bordeaux, to the colony. His wife had apparently, like I said earlier, had died in France. All 3 sons married into their other founding families of the colony after being set up with various lands and positions within the area. The establishment of the Lauzon's family in the colony was probably intended to inspire confidence among the settlers and encourage agriculture in addition to the fur trade. He was the first governor to pursue this type of policy. In 1653, Lauzon negotiated a peace treaty with the Mohawk, an Iroquois nation based in what is now known as New York. It ended their attacks on the French settlers at the time and reduced the threat to the colony for some years. Afterward, he accorded to himself the monopoly on the fur trade. The settlers, though, sought to open the trade by petitioning King Louis XIV. The king responded by ordering the fur trade to be reopened to all colonists. So, that was our great-grandfather. He had, seemed like, a lot of control over the new colony and prospered quite well at the time. Lauzon returned to France, where he continued his business and political career. He died in 1666 at the age of 83 in Paris. One of his descendants, Marie Catherine Antoinette, you might recognize the name, de Lauzon, married Roland Michel Barin de la Galissonière, I have his year, 1747 to 1749, who was also served as the governor of Canada. So it was later on that he replaced our great-grandfather. The town of Lauzon, Quebec, was named in Jean de Lauzon's honor in 1867. So the town of Lauzon is named after somebody in our heritage. So getting back to the lineage, the sixth born of that family, Pierre Lauzon, born 1600 to 6, was our 10th great-grandfather. Like I said earlier, was the second landed immigrant. And now I'm going to get into another great story, Gilles Lauzon, who was a great-grandson of our first landed immigrant and the governor of New France. Gilles Lauzon was born in 1631, died in 1687, was our 9th great-grandfather, was part of what's called the La Grande Recrue de 1653, and he was the 3rd landed immigrant of the Lauzon family. So although there were others that were born once Pierre was here and he had kids, but Gilles actually he was a great-grandson. He was born in France. So I'll get to his story. Gilles, or Jean de Lauzon, the governor of France, was instrumental in this next story about his great-grandson, Gilles Lauzon. Gilles Lauzon, born 1633, died 1687, was the 3rd landed immigrant of the Lauzon family, as I stated earlier. When Gilles Lauzon was born on November 8th, 1631, in Caen, Calvados, France, his father, Pierre, was 31, and his mother, Anne, was 31 as well. He married Marie-Anne Archambault from Montreal, Quebec. He died on September 21st, 1687 in Montreal, Quebec, at the age of 55. Marie-Anne Archambault was born in 1644 in La Rochelle, Charente-Maritime, France. Her father, Jacques, was 40. She married Gilles Lauzon on November 27, 1656 in Montreal, Quebec. They had 13 children in 26 years, and she died August 8, 1685 in Montreal, Quebec, at the age of 41. So I'm just going to list quickly their children here. Number 1 was Michel Lauzon, born 1657 to 1683. Second was Marguerite Lauzon, born 1659, died 1699. Third was Francois Lauzon, born 1662 and died 1719. Fourth was Marie Lauzon, born 1663, and I have no record of what happened to her. Fifth was Catherine Lauzon, born 1666, died 1735. The sixth was Séraphin Lauzon, born 1668 and died 1737. And the seventh was Louise Lauzon, born 1671 and died 1713. The eighth born was Michel Lauzon, born 1673 and died 1749, followed by number 9, Paul Lauzon, born 1675 and died 1735, who was followed by Marie-Madeleine Lauzon, born 1677, died 1714, who was followed by Anne Lauzon, born 1679 and died 1687. followed by Jean Lauzon, born 1681 and died 1687. And then finally, Gilles Lauzon, born 1684 and died 1733. So here is the story of La Grande Recrue and the 1653 and the significance to these ancestors, these people that immigrated to Canada. In 1651, the need to defend the newly created town of Ville-Marie, which was Montreal, from the attacking Iroquois was more than apparent. Under the direction of Jean de Lauzon, the fourth governor of New France, that's our great-grandfather, Paul Chaumette de Maisonneuve departed for France to enlist 100 men, recruits, to protect the town of Ville-Marie, because they needed more people because they were constantly being attacked. So they said, well, we'll go back to France and see if we can't find some more. So it took 2 years for these brave men to arrive in New France. The recruits came from Picardy, Champagne, Ile-de-France, Normandy, Anjou, and Maine. During the spring of 1653, approximately 150 men signed contracts with the Company of Ville-Marie. In the end, only less than 105 eventually arrived in Ville-Marie. The original departure from Nantes, which is a big port in France, was scheduled for the spring of 1653. After multiple delays, the vessel Saint Nicolas de Nantes set sail for New France on June 20th under the command of Captain Pierre Le Besson. The Saint Nicolas de Nantes was apparently in very poor shape at the time, which constantly took on water. Despite the best efforts of the crew and the recruits, it became necessary to sail back to Nantes after several weeks at sea. Maisonneuve, realizing that many of his recruits might want to stay in France after their recent misadventure, put his recruits on an island from where none of them could escape. Only on July 20th, a replacement ship finally set sail for New France. And on September 22nd, 1653, the ship landed at Quebec after 64 days at sea, at Quebec City. When they arrived, Governor Lauzon refused to let them have the necessary boats to complete their journey to Ville-Marie, as they were sorely needed to defend Quebec. The group finally arrived at Ville-Marie on November 16, 1653. Now, the Dubé Dozen's ninth grandfather, Gilles Lauzon, was a skilled coppersmith and was among the 100 recruits, the fourth of the Lauzon family and the third in direct succession, obviously, Jean de Lauzon's great-grandson, to immigrate to New France. He was given a piece of land where he built a small 400-square-foot house. Gilles married Marie-Anne Archambault on November 27, 1656, in Ville-Marie, Quebec. They had 13 children in 26 years. Gilles died on September 21, 1687, in Ville-Marie, Quebec, at the age of 55. A plaque honoring La Grande Recrue de 1653 can be found at Point Aquelier, the Museum of Archaeology and History, basically the Museum of Archaeology and History of Montreal in Montreal, Quebec, that bears his name as a member of this historic group of immigrants. And if we continue, there's a few more people in that line that getting that down to the closest to our family. The eighth was, so that's that great story. And now here's number 8. Michel Lauzon was our 8th great-grandfather, born 1673, died 1749. François-Marie Lauzon, born 1709, died 1800. That was our 7th great-grandfather. Or actually, I think that's, great-grandmother. Jean-Baptiste Lauzon, 1709, born 1800, 6th great-grandfather. I'm not sure why the name, I'm not sure why why Marie was there. I may have that wrong, but he should have been a grandfather. Jacques Amédée Lauzon, born 1742 to 1832, was my 5th great-grandfather. And Michel Lauzon, born 1785 to 1867, was the 4th great-grandfather. Followed by Romuald Lauzon, 1825 to 1892, was our 3rd great-grandfather. And obviously you can see the pic that I found. He was followed by Joseph Demetrius Lauzon, born 1859. No record of his date of death, but he was our 2nd great-grandfather. Followed by Emilia Lauzon, 1893 to 1963, our 1st great-grandmother, and that is who married Emile Dubé. So that's the Lozelle connection to the Dubé family, because Emile married Emilia, which brought that great connection to those great stories about the first immigrants that landed in New France. And now we're going to continue on with another great connection from the Morin lineage and the first landed immigrants to the New World. So let's get into the Morin family lineage. So my grandfather, Joseph George Roger Dubé, married Marie Beatrice Dorothy Morin. She was the matriarch to the Dubé dozen. This is their story of the family lineage. I traced the Morin, which is, they say, spelled our Morin, M-O-R-I-N, family as far back as the 1500s to Guillaume Morin, our 10th great-grandfather. I had no record of his date of birth, but I have a record of his death, which was in 1591. And then he obviously gave birth to our 9th great-grandfather, George Morin. Again, the birth date's unknown, but I found the death record, who died 1619. And we know because it's connected to his father, like there's a record of that. Third, Pierre Morin was our 8th great-grandfather. Now I have a record of his birth of 1609, but I have no record of his death. He was our 8th great-grandfather. Followed by number 4, Maria Morin, born 1648, died 1702. And he was our 7th great-grandfather, followed by Francois Morin, born 1696 and died 1753, who was our 6th great-grandfather. And then this is where we have the first landed immigrant, the 6th born, Francois Antoine Morin, born 1730 to 1788, was our 5th great-grandfather and the first landed immigrant of the Morin family in the New World. So Francois Antoine Morin was, like I said, the first landed immigrant of the Morin family and our 5th grandfather. He was born in the year 1730 at Saint-Vincent, Foix-Palminier, France. He was the son of Marien and Françoise. He immigrated to New France sometime between 1750 and 1759, because I don't know exactly what year he came. He married Marie Joseph Laporte St. George on October 6, 1760 in L'Assomption, Quebec. They had 2 children during their marriage. He died on February 3rd, 1788 in L'Assomption, Quebec at the age of 58. So their 2 children were Louis Morin, born 1770 and died 1848, and he was our 4th great-grandfather. And he was followed by Etienne Morin, born 1774 and died 1861. The 7th was Louis Morin, born 1770 to 1848, which was our 4th great-grandfather, followed by Louis Morin again, namesake, 1808 to 1880, he was the 3rd great-grandfather, followed by Pierre Morin, 1835 to 1897, our 2nd great-grandfather, followed by Felix Morin, born 1880 to 1964, who was our 1st great-grandfather, and our grandmother's father, Marie Beatrice Dorothy Morin, born 1914 and 1993, is my grandmother and the matriarch to the Dubé dozen. So when Marie Beatrice Dorothy Morin was born on August 18th, 1914, in Blind River, Ontario, her father Felix was 33 and her mother Anna Couture, and we'll get to that Couture family in a second, was 21. She married Joseph George Roger Dubé on December 26, 1929 in Ottawa. They had 12 children, who I affectionately call the Dubé dozen. In 17 years, she died on August 5th, 1993 in Ottawa, Ontario at the age of 78. Now, my grandmother's lineage also has another historical figure from my mother's side. Marie's father, Felix Morin, our 1st great-grandfather on the Morin side, married Anna Couture. And it's a very important figure, not just in Canadian history, but in North American history. When Felix Morin was born on December 20th, 1880 in St. Hyacinthe, Quebec, his father, Pierre, was 45 and his mother, Sophia, was 42. He had 3 sons and 2 daughters with Anna between 1908 and 1914. He died on October 30th, 1964 in Canada at the age of 83 and was buried here in Ottawa. When Anna Couture was born on May 2nd, 1893 in Bay City, Michigan, USA, her father Camille was 41 and her mother Marie was 31. She married Felix Morin on July 28th, 1908 in Algoma, Ontario. No idea how she got there or but that's what happened. They had 5 children during their marriage. She died July 18th, 1979 in Ottawa at the age of 86 and was buried here in Ottawa. So this is where I want to get into now the Couture lineage and the story of what is called the hero of New France, a very important figure in Canadian history. I'm going to quickly go through the lineage and then get right to his epic story. Jean Couture, okay, number one, the first Couture that I could, when I searched back, I got back into the 1500s. So our 11th great grandfather on the Couture side, Jean Couture, was born in 1545 and died in 1615. Followed by Pierre Couture, born in 1565, died 1637. He was our 10th great grandfather. Followed by Guillaume, and that says Questure, 1585 to 1632, our 9th great grandfather. There was there's many times where there's a change in spelling of names. And for whatever reason, Couture was originally at one time, Guillaume spelt it Cousture. And some people continued the spelling and some people didn't. His son, the fourth the fourth in that family that I was going back, and the fourth person that I could find, Guillaume Couture, was kind of his namesake, born 1617, died 1701, was our 8th great grandfather, and he was the hero of New France, the first landed immigrant of the Couture family name across North America. So anybody who's a Couture in North America, he's our great grandfather, or their great grandfather. Like, he was the first one in North America. Followed by number 5, Eustache Francois Couture, his son, 1667 to 1745, our 7th great grandfather. I'll get back to the hero of New France story when I'm done this section. The 6th, Philippe Olivier Couture, born 1698 to 1749, was our 6th great grandfather. The 5th great grandfather, and 7th going back, Joseph Olivier Couture, born 1734 to 1788. Then he had Louis Guillaume Couture, our 4th great grandfather, born 1762, died 1820. Followed by Etienne Couture, born 1801 to died 1866, was our 3rd great grandfather. Followed by Camille Couture, born 1852 to 1927, was our 2nd great grandfather. And then comes their child, Anna Couture, who was our 1st great grandmother, all right, who married a Dubé, 1893 to 1979, gave birth to Marie Beatrice Dorothy Morin, our grandfather, my grandmother, born 1914 and 1993. And that's the connection to the Dubé dozen. But now I want to tell you this fantastic story about our 8th great grandfather on the Couture side, who was also noted as the hero of New France. His name, Guillaume Couture, he was born on January 14, 1617, in Rouen, Saint-Martin, France. His father, Guillaume, was 32, and his mother, Marie Madeleine, was 32. His fantastic story is coming up, but he married Anne Aymar on November 16, 1649, in Notre Dame, New Brunswick. He died on April 4th, 1701 in Quebec City, having lived a long life of 84 years. Anne Aymar, my 8th great grandmother, was born on October 22nd, 1627 in Nouart, Department de Deux-Sèvres, Poitou-Charentes, France. I hope my French is okay with everybody. She immigrated to New France and was pledged to be married to Guillaume Couture, so it was a pledged marriage. They had 10 children over 19 years together. She died in 1700 in Lauson, Quebec, at the age of 73, and I'll run through the 10 kids. The first was Jean-Baptiste Couture, born 1650, died 1698. The second was Anne Couture, born 1652, died 1684, followed by Louis Couture, born 1654, died 1681, followed by Marguerite Couture, born 1656, died 1690, followed by Marie Couture, born 1658 to 1702, followed by Charles Couture, born 1660 to 1709, then followed by Guillaume Couture III, because he carried his grandfather's or his father's name, 1662 to 1738, followed by Louis Couture, born 1665, died 1751, followed by Eustache Francois Couture, born 1667, died 1745, who was our seventh great-grandfather out of all the kids. And number 10 was Zoche Valget, born 1670, died 1733. I want to end today's show with a very impressive story, like I've mentioned a few times now, of my eighth great-grandfather. As I said earlier, my grandmother Patrice, the matriarch of the Dubé Dozen, was the daughter of Anna Couture, my great-grandmother. Both are direct descendants, which obviously includes all of the Dubé clan, of the hero of New France, Guillaume Couture. The first landed immigrant and the one common ancestor to every known person who bears the name Couture in North America. The name Couture, as I said earlier, just as the Buck name, had its origins in medieval France, more specifically Normandy, France. The S was later in Couture was eventually dropped, hence the variation in the name Couture. I have to thank, this is a story that I got from my Uncle Roy. He passed it along to me. He was given the story by Aunt Jerry, who was Geraldine Dubé, which would have been like my great aunt, it would have been his aunt. The story can also be found in numerous places on the internet, so you could actually Google the story and find it in many places. Here is the story, the hero of New France. So here, Guillaume Couture arrived in what was once called New France, now Quebec. According to ship records in 1649, he was born in Saint-Godard-de-Rennes, Normandy, on the 14th of January, 1617. It was always his intention to leave France for the New World. He was likely recruited by René Goupil, a Jesuit priest in Normandy. He had inherited lands in France from his father, but passed them on to his mother and his sister, who remained in France. This would be the beginning of a tremendously adventurous life for this young pioneer. However, his story, as told by fathers Isaac Jogues and René Goupil, tell of a story of a Couture being here as early as 1640, so it's not really clear exactly what year he came. Couture learned many native dialects, which made him a precious asset for his Jesuit counterparts. Over the course of his life, he made many expeditions with many harrowing debonaires. He was a pioneer. In 1642, he left Trois-Rivières, where he was living, to join a Huron expedition with Jogues and Goupil and 19 Huron Indians. Near Lac Saint-Pierre, Quebec, the convoy was attacked by as many as 80 Iroquois warriors. In the heart of the battle, Couture managed to shoot and kill one of the chiefs, but the battle hadn't been lost anyway. Couture escaped, but soon realized that he had left his friends behind to be captured. Knowing this, he returned to the area where he was also captured. He endured tremendous torture. They stabbed him him through his hand. They beat him with sticks. They pulled his fingernails out, and they even tried to cut a finger off. His Jesuit friends were also tortured, and according to Jogues' notes of this encounter, Goupil was assassinated with a tomahawk for trying to teach a native boy the sign of the cross. Just as many Jesuits now known as Les Saints Martyrs, the Saints of Canadian Martyrs, lost the French pronunciation there. Jogues managed to escape with the help of the Dutch, while Couture remained behind. He was eventually moved to another village where the widow of the chief he killed was given the right to choose his fate. For whatever reason, they didn't kill him. They decided to give him to the wife of the chief that he killed. She ended up adopting the young Couture into the tribe, where he assimilated their culture and beliefs, learning more about their traditions. Because of this, he became a valued member of the village, becoming a member of the tribe council. He was the first and only Frenchman to ever win the confidence and the friendship of the Iroquois. In 1645, he led Chief Keositan and his followers back to Trois-Rivières. Couture played a significant role in the negotiation and permanent truce between the Iroquois, the Hurons, and France. This was abruptly halted, though, upon the brutal massacre of Jogues and Lalande, who had been dispensed as emissaries to the Iroquois nation. They went basically to negotiate more deals and they killed them. Refusing to be discouraged, Couture returned to the Huron, or Huronie, in 1647 to renew the truce with the Iroquois, but it met with failure. Upon returning to Trois-Rivières, he was welcomed as a hero and was given the nickname the Valiant Couture, Le Valier Couture, by Father Jacques Bouteau. He became the first settler of Levi, established himself as the Seigneurie of Lauson. He soon after married Anne Amiard. They had 10 children together. And he apparently held many titles while living there. Like he was, apart from being a negotiator and a pioneer, you know, he had other legal titles, but he only ever called himself a simple carpenter. His experience with the Indian nation was considered very valuable and unequaled. The authorities again asked for his help in 1657, where he served as an interpreter for the Onondaga nation. In 1661, he joined another expedition to find the North Sea by land. The mission was aborted, though, when their Indian guides abandoned them. 2 years later, Couture was named commander of a new expedition where he was joined by Pierre Duquet and Jean Langlois. Together with many Indian guides, they traveled the Saguenay River by canoe, eventually reaching the Rupert River. Couture established new relationships with these northern tribes, finding them more peaceful than the Iroquois and the Hurons. A lake in Quebec, Quebec's north, now bears his name. A statue stands today in Point Lévis, Quebec. About 1666, Couture was named the captain of the Côte de Lauson militia. At the age of 73 in 1690, during the British siege of Quebec, Couture and his men managed to keep the British from landing in Lauson. The valiant Couture passed away on April 4th, 1701. This hero, the Dubé Dozen's 8th great-grandfather, was put to rest, but his final resting place remains a mystery still today. Guillaume Couture's statue can be seen on Point Lévis on the south shore of the St. Lawrence River across from Quebec City. Now, this may only be my opinion, but I believe there was an obvious connection between Jean de Lauzon, the governor of New France, Guillaume Couture, the hero of New France, Gilles Lauzon, a member of Le Grand Recruit de 1653, and François-Antoine Morin and Jean-Baptiste Dubuc. They were all the first landed immigrants to Canada, all around the same time, from our direct lineage, and as all now we know, a part of the Norman conquest of Canada. So you see, we had a fantastic connection to our ancestry, some pretty historical figures. I thought they were cool. I think it's a great story. I hope you enjoyed today's show. Stay tuned for part 4 of the series, Knights in the Royal Gallery.